Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another night of our long-term plan Zoom meetings. First of all, thank you for those that have been online before, and welcome to the new people. So tonight, there will be another session on our long-term plan, but tonight's focus will be around the key choices. But first, some introductions. I have councillors Coral Rokawa online. Coral, can you unmute yourself and just introduce yourself, please?
Kia ora everybody, my name's Coral Rokawa. I'm the councillor for the Southern Ward. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And we have our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Nigel Belsham, online, who is also Chair of Finance. It might be very useful to have you here tonight, Nigel. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So Nigel Belsham, Deputy Mayor, as Andy said, and this is my 7th year on council, representing the Central Ward. So living here in Martin, run a business, and yeah, love the district, and here to provide as much input as I can tonight.
Thanks, Nigel. And in terms of staff, we have our Head of Finance. I think the old term would be a Chief Financial Officer, but Dave, I'm sure your title is much longer than that. Welcome and pleased to have you here tonight. If you could just introduce yourself.
Good evening. Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, Dave Toombs. I think my official title is Group Manager of Corporate Services. It covers finance and IT, risk, audit, and various other financial governance aspects, and obviously information technology.
Thanks very much, everybody. And I'm sure that we have some councillors live listening in as well. Tonight, we'll start, first of all, for those who are new to this, with a very, very quick refresher around what a long-term plan is. The speed dating version of this is basically council forms a budget as to what services it will provide over the next 10 years, focusing on the first 3 years. The first year is a long-term plan year, years 2 and 3 are annual plans, and then it gets refreshed again by the next council, bearing in mind that councillors have a 3-year term. We not only look at a 10-year program, but we also look out infrastructurally at either 30 or 50 years, depending on what sorts of assets we're talking about. So the budget considers where we are now as a district, what we intend to provide in the future, the needs and aspirations of communities and council. And the tricky thing will be in this, who pays? How will those wishes be funded by council? So council has just come out with the long-term plan approved by audit last week. So it is now live, and we'll take submissions starting now and closing 10th of May. So it's open virtually for a month. This will be your chance to have your say as to what you want the district to provide over the next 10 years. Now, I'm going to move on to some of the specific things we want feedback on, but please remember, when you're making submissions to council, you don't have to just submit on the things that we have in our plan. Any wish that you have for your community can be addressed, and you can ask to appear in front of council or just write in on one of the submission forms. I'll go back over that before we close off the meeting tonight. The first one, I'm going to pass over to Deputy Mayor and Head of Finance, Dave, in terms, I see there's an option within our budgets around funding from the LGFA. Who would like to tell me a little bit about this, what it is and why we're considering it? Dave, to you first.
Thank you, Your Worship. If anyone's interested in a lot of information about the LGFA, Local Government Funding Agency, they do have a website. It's a very, very large organisation set up, I think, around 2009-ish. I might be wrong there, don't quote me on that. I'm not a salesperson for LGFA. I just happen to know a bit about them. They were set up specifically to assist local governments in managing debts. And again, I don't want to be a spokesperson for them, but what they've done, they put together a program where they can, up until now, they've been able to provide debt to local governments at rates cheaper than what local governments can get direct from the market. So that's obviously created financial benefits for everyone that's so far been a member of LGFA.
So
Not
Dave,
only, yes,
sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
that's fine.
But so essentially what you're saying, it's a form of bank, a process of being able to borrow money.
Yes, essentially, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things around the edges. Benefits to the local governments that I've joined up so far have been they've been able to access better rates, and they've been able to lock in their borrowings for longer terms than what they would otherwise been able to achieve, which in today's current environment is obviously a huge benefit. Interest rates being at an all-time low, it would be great to lock in for long periods right now. Sorry,
Sorry, go on.
no.
I'm
Now,
just firing some questions at you. I should
okay.
have waited.
All right. Well, there's different levels of membership of LGFA. Any council can basically borrow up to 20 million, and it's just as a bank. You pick up the phone, you borrow money. They're just called normal members, and we are currently one of them. We have borrowings of 3 million with LGFA that we've had now for a couple of years. Our long-term plan shows that our debt is forecast to go way above 20 million for a number of years before it comes down again. So what we've got various options here. We can borrow 20 million from LGFA and stay a non-guaranteeing member and borrow the rest from banks and probably end up paying a higher interest rate. Or we can become what's called a guaranteeing member of LGFA, which will enable us to borrow more than 20 million. But by being a guaranteeing member, we start guaranteeing the debts of LGFA alongside every other guaranteeing member, of which there are over 60 councils in New Zealand currently. So we're by no means breaking new ground here. We're one of the few councils that aren't actually a member of LGFA, a guaranteeing member of LGFA. Most councils that currently aren't a guaranteeing member of LGFA is because their borrowings are less than 20 million. So they don't need to become a guaranteeing member. If we become a guaranteeing member, our interest rates that we'll be paying will become slightly less again. So LGFA have different levels of interest rate depending on your credit rating and your level of borrowings. An interesting aspect here is when people hear that by becoming a guaranteeing member of LGFA, you start guaranteeing the debts of LGFA, that suggests there's a risk. And interestingly, the agencies that give councils credit ratings, they actually recognize being a member of LGFA as a positive. So organizations such as Standard & Poor's and Fitch's, which provide credit ratings for councils, they actually, as I said, they see this as a positive move for councils, and they actually, and because that increases their credit rating, they access cheaper interest rates again. So in professional independent firms who specialize in this area see this as a positive thing to become a guaranteeing member of LGFA.
So Dave, us being a guarantor member, why do we need to consult? Is that a requirement, a legal requirement to do so?
It is. Once we start guaranteeing an agency such as this, we are required to consult, yes. Yeah. But another thing I'd like to emphasize is becoming a member doesn't obligate us to borrow from LGFA. All this does is gives us another option that if all the market conditions are right and in our favor, we can choose to borrow from LGFA or we can choose to borrow from the private sector. And I think that's an important consideration too. It's not locking us into anything. It just gives us an extra option. And generally speaking, options are good.
Our previous history on debt's very low, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think we've only got about around 3 million that we're debt at the moment.
Currently 3 million. I think I'd rather not quote the LTP because I can't remember the figures, but I know over the first 3 or 4 years that is expected to significantly increase and take us over the $20 million limit for members to become guaranteeing members, should they choose to borrow from the LGFA.
Nigel, as head of finance for the governance of council, do you have any hesitation around this process?
No, thanks, Andy, and thanks, Dave, for the explanation, because I don't think I can add anything to what you've provided there. Look, no, as a council, I think it's a prudent move, as shown in our long-term plan, the draft long-term plan. We've got a significant amount of infrastructure spend coming forward, and if we don't take up this option, I think it limits us to our ability to go and look for lenders. As Dave said, the interest rates that we will get out of being a member of LGFA and a guarantee member are a significant saving for our ratepayers. So I think it's a wise move, and as Dave said, we've got a significant amount of spend coming up in our next 10 years for our infrastructure. So yeah, there's certainly no risk other than what Dave's shown from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. I have had a question from Michelle asking, how does the long-term plan look? Is it good for us? I think you might have to refine that question a little bit, Michelle, as to exactly what information you're looking for. I think the long-term plan shows that we're in a great position at the moment, but we have an enormous amount of significant capital projects that are going to unwind throughout the time of the long-term plan. As a district, our population is looking to increase quite dramatically, which is great. I'd like to move on now to the next subject tonight, and that's one of the key options. And in the documents that will be going out and are currently out in the place at the moment around framing our future, event sponsorship, which is, I think, page 26 of the consultation document. At the moment, the proposal is to increase that budget from $25,000 to $50,000 a year. And Nigel, in a second, I'll give you a warning here that I'm going to be asking you to comment on it. It would come at a cost of $3.20 per ratepayer to do that. Would you like to comment?
Yes, more than happy to provide some info here. Look, I've chaired the funding committees that have supported the events funding as well as the community initiatives funding. And every year we get oversubscribed for funding applications. And there are events that are held in our district that are significant, and they have a significant benefit to us. You look through the Hunterville Shamozzle, Taiapi AMP show, Sheeran Sports, a few Christmas parades, things like that. Now, I think it's important that the district council is a strong supporter of these. I certainly would think that our ratepayers would benefit and would actually agree, I'm hoping they'll agree, that we need to get in to support these events. They're significant for our district. Take a look at the recent one that happened in Martin, the Harvest Festival. That brought a significant amount of people into our area, and it really showcases our district. And if we can provide some extra support to those sort of events, I think it's going to be beneficial to everyone across the district.
So Nigel, that increase to $50,000 is council's preferred position, and it is in our current budgets for the draft long-term plan. So if the community said we're not going to go that way, presumably that comes out of the budget. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's right. So it drops back to the current funding level, which is $25,000 per annum. So it would reduce the impact on rating if the public decide that they don't want to support it.
Nigel, you often chair that process around the distribution of the money, and there are 2 funding rounds a year. Generally, is it, are we struggling to fund the organisations at the level they want funding? How's it played out?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We certainly get, like I said before, we get oversubscribed for the amount of funding that people apply for. And when you've got to try and split up 25,000 over, I mean, I think the first round of funding for this financial year, we had nearly $30,000 of applications. And so that would have wiped out that whole year's budget. And that was just in the first round. So, and then we've got to pull back, you know, when you're assessing these applications, you've got to pull back and try and, you know, make a decision on how you're going to support these events and are they actually going to be able to take place if we don't get back in and support them well. So, yeah, it's a struggle at the moment. And I definitely think the increase in budget will make a significant difference to some of these applications.
Okay, thank you. I need to answer a fairly specific question. I've got Alicia coming in saying how much of the ratepayers' money went into the new playground. Well, first of all, this isn't event sponsorship. It is a separate subject. So council set up a fund, and I think it's $150,000 a year with a maximum of $50,000 to one new playground upgrade at a time. So for instance, the playground there, which is, I was at today, and we've just filmed actually for 7 Sharp, which will screen, I think, on Friday or Monday night. So council gave that opportunity to the Martin Development Group, and that was our initial funding. We had to do a little bit more funding in terms of the infrastructure surrounding the playground. So the Martin Development Group essentially funded a playground over $1 million, you know, so an incredible effort. So most of that playground has not come out of the ratepayer pocket, only a very small portion of it is. And that option is open to, I know that Ratana Playground are looking at taking up that sort of option. I know Charity and her group and Tai Happy are looking to do the same. Wilson Park, there's another group there. Those are all options that people can apply to for a reasonably set fund. There's a question also, Linda says, there is now a paper copy of the long-term plan available for perusal by residents. Yes, absolutely. And this week there'll be a hard copy, as I understand it, that will be available, will circulate. It's also on the council websites, etc. Dave or Nigel or Coral, anything further from you around events sponsorship?
I might just jump something you just mentioned then, Your Worship, about the long-term plan. Just to emphasise, it's a draft long-term plan. Nothing's going to be finalised for another couple of months yet, based on responses we get from the community.
Yes, absolutely. And I should reinforce that comment. So it goes out for submissions now. People can apply in writing, submit in writing with their wishes. They can appear in front of council. And then councillors will sit down, look at all of those submissions, and we have an obligation to answer each one of them and then make the final decision. And that long-term plan will become active for July next year. Yes, correct. I had to think for myself for a second. And associated with the long-term plan, there's a raft of other documents, asset management plans, revenue and financing policies, etc., as to who's going to pay, etc. Coral, welcome. I see you've wanting to ask a question.
Just to reiterate, with the event sponsorship, even though we're saying the fund from 25,000 to 50,000, there's nothing stopping the community from saying, well, hey, I think that's a bit light. Could you, in the submission, you could probably, anybody could say, could you increase it a little bit more?
Absolutely.
There's nothing stopping anybody from saying that. Is that right?
Absolutely. You could get an individual or group saying, you could get an individual or group saying, well, 50,000 doesn't cut it, and it's a very low figure compared to a lot of our neighbouring districts, and we're known for our events. Let's do it. Let's do it better. Let's increase it. Nigel.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Just going back to your point around that online version available on the website, I think it's important to note too, if you're using that online version, you get the extra benefits of being able to click those links and revert back to some attached information, which you may not get with the paper version. So if you're looking at the long-term plan, good advice is to look at it online and actually utilise the links that are in that online version. It'll give you a lot more information that we've used as supporting information to make some of our decisions in there as well.
So what you're referring to is the little hash code that's on some of the pages, but they can literally click through there.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, the hash code, and there'll also be some highlighted hyperlinks that'll take them to another document to give them further information as well. So yeah, definitely the online version will give you a lot more information to look through.
Yeah, I think the technical term might be the QR code, but yes, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, just to let people know, if they do get the online version and think, oh, I'll have a copy of that to hit print, I think it's 197 pages long. So just be mindful. It's not a 20-second print job.
No, thank you. It's late night reading for those that can't sleep. I'd like to move on in terms of another key option that we are facing, and that is the additional economic development activities. This is key choice 3, and the option to increase the economic development funding. So the option, first of all, is to increase the economic development funding by another $170,000 year 1 and $122,000 year 2, 3 and 4. So they come at relative costs, the ratepayer of $22.12 and $15.70 per year. Now, our existing economic development budget sits at $200,000 a year, so you'd be increasing it by those factors. I have been given some notes around what the extra money would be used for, and first of all, I'll run through some of them reasonably quickly. It would involve a district management plan outlining how the council can grow and promote and manage the visitor economy. Essentially motivating more people to spend money in our district. There'd be some district marketing, photography, promotion and videos telling our stories. There would be a survey that will list the established and new businesses throughout the district, including retail stores, service providers, manufacturers and home-based businesses, to assist them and so that people can find them and purchase from them, obviously. And a survey also of what businesses residents would want that may not necessarily be here. Again, we'd go out to our primary producers, our farmers producing beef, lamb, vegetable growers, etc., and determine how council can assist them. And it is important to emphasise that what we're wanting to establish is sustainable economic growth. This underpins the whole future of our district. You know, economic well-being is a vital component of a community well-being and strongly underpins the 3 social, cultural and environmental factors. If we're not strong, sustainable, a healthy economy, we can't support the other important aspects of a community, such as community connection through facilities, parks and spaces, play spaces, etc. Economic development contributes to the social good of the community, providing increased well-paid employment, more opportunities for people to stay and build their future in the community, and creating attractive downtown centres, etc. I know that sounds quite a mouthful, and obviously you can go online and look up those codes and go back through that information. So questions from Nigel, Coral. Do you wish to comment first of all on economic development? If not, I'll go and talk about what we currently do.
Yeah, Andy, I think one of the biggest things that we can achieve out of this potential increase in economic development is marketing our district. I think that's one thing that we haven't done well. We've got a fantastic place. We've got some great opportunities. We're starting to see a bit of investment in, as far as residential investment goes, also industrial investment. And I think we need to get our story out there and promote some of the opportunities that our district actually has. And unfortunately, you can't do that without spending a bit of money. So, you know, to put some better emphasis on that, I think, as you said, will create some real interest in our district, and you know, in a managed way, in a sustainable way. So I think it's important that when we're looking at this decision, that we look at the huge benefits that can come along with that extra spend.
Okay, I've been out in the community quite a bit, along with a number of other councillors with long-term plan meetings. For some of those, at some of those meetings, people have said, you know, you've got a $200,000 budget now. What does that mean, and what things has it been used for? I think, first of all, we employ 1.5 people in this sort of space. That's the quantum of sort of staff time at the moment. There are a number of economic incentives out there that come out of these sorts of budgets. So, for instance, we have a number of earthquake-prone buildings, and the earthquake-prone legislation is something that has been enacted by government. Some of our earthquake-prone buildings obviously have a fairly limited time. They either have to be brought up to code or in the future demolished in 15 years' time. So people with those buildings can apply for help, either financial help or consent costs, that's the internal staff consent costs, and could even apply for some rates. So those are all applications on case-by-case basis. We set out in the last LTP to focus on economic development. And why did we do that? I guess it's because for years the population was steadily decreasing. And essentially we needed new homes, new people to share the rate burden and to make the district sustainable. If the population slide had continued, you'd have businesses wanting to leave the district, or potentially schools that would struggle to exist, or subjects that wouldn't be offered by some of those schools. So there's some economic development to encourage the developer and the homeowner. And I know, Nigel, you've had quite a role with this with me around how we've done that. Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, so going back probably a bit more than 3 years ago now, when we introduced a rate incentive to look at getting new properties into our district. That was certainly a key driver for me on council, wanting to attract new residents, and it's about sharing the load for the ratepayer. We've known for a long time that we're a huge, sparsely based district, lots and lots of land, but only a few ratepayers within our district. So to help spread that load really is about growing the district and growing the ratepayer base. And while there were a lot of developments happening around our neighbouring districts, we weren't seeing that happening in our district. So that was a way of incentivising and enticing people to come and build into our district. And you know, it's certainly played out. We're starting to see some real growth in our district in the residential sector. So it's played its part. It's certainly not the only thing that's brought people here, but it certainly has played its part as an incentive to grow our district.
Yeah, thank you. So you've seen it as being very successful?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think it's been a worthwhile incentive that we've put in place. Of course, it's about managing that growth and within our district. Certainly, we've got a lot of growth happening in the southern area. The northern part of the district certainly, I think, is there, and the ability to grow there is huge as well. And I'd like to see some sort of incentive stay in place for certainly in the northern part of our district around Taihape and the Hunterville area.
Yes, I think that may be a very key decision that councillors will face, because yes, we've got hundreds of new homes being built in the southern part of our district, but encouraging people to build further north is still an issue that certainly I think we would want to look at. So I tend to share your thoughts there. Dave, when we talk about a rate increase of just under 7% in the long-term plan draft document, essentially that's the increased cost of running the district, isn't it? And then we disperse it amongst the ratepayers. So effectively, the more ratepayers we get, in simple terms, does that help ease the load?
Yeah, great question, Andy. Yeah, the draft long-term plan shows that for the first 2 years, we're predicting rates increases of 6.5%, 7%. But from years 3 to 10, the average is going to be capped at 5%. And that 5%, let's just focus on that because the numbers are easier. That 5% is the total amount that council will collect. So if the number of ratepayers increases, even though rates go up by 5%, each existing ratepayers increase will be less than 5%. So I think the example we've got in our revenue and finance policy is if council puts rates up by 5% and there's a 2% increase in the population, existing ratepayers, their increase is only 3% or 2.95%. So yeah, growth does certainly spread and dilutes the rates increase amongst existing shareholders, yes.
So Dave, what happens then? There's been a lot of talk about industries wanting to come to our patch, and they're talking really in the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital investment. How does that play out against the rate position? If
new ratepayers come in and they're spending that money on our infrastructure, is that what you're saying, Andy?
Yes.
Yeah. If they're enhancing our infrastructure, then existing ratepayers will benefit to different degrees. But what it also does is if a new business comes in, a large part of each ratepayer's rates assessment is based on the capital value of their property. So if a new ratepayer turns up and builds a $50 million, for argument's sake, $20 million rateable property, a unit, basically in our language is a rateable property, that will have a big impact on existing ratepayers because it spreads the rate burden more in their favour because they've got a higher capital value.
So to facilitate that under the existing economic development budget, there's some things in there to help either expand and retain existing businesses or to encourage new businesses within the district. And I guess one of the ways we've done this in terms of the economic development plans that we've currently had is looking at the district plan changes, both rural to industrial and rural to urban. I know I'm just warning you, Nigel, that I'm going to drop a question on you around your views around this. And, you know, in some places we have very limited options available unless we go through this sort of spatial planning and planning operation. Do you wish to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think it is a long-term view to look at how we're going to set out our growth in our bigger areas, bigger centres. But certainly there needs to be some investment put into there to understand where the better areas are to grow our district residentially. And also, you know, some of our rules around growth, changing land from rural into residential, they're quite restrictive, and I think some emphasis needs to be put in there. And that's where obviously we're going to have to go through you know, review of the district plan and put some emphasis in behind that, but also with the employment of a new spatial planner, that'll give us some really good understanding about where our infrastructure is, where we need to concentrate our spend as a district, as a council, and plan for growth with some facts behind it, rather than just doing it on a sort of.
So it's not just us alone involved in this space. Regionally, the councils work together on these things with regional plans and accessing Central North Island, but we also have CEDA on our doorstep and Wanganui partners on our doorstep that are in this space that we can call on. I guess there's also a role in here for you know, the Project Martins, who have facilitated a lot of the business after 5 meetings, etc. And our community committees and community trusts, etc., community boards, they play a fairly valuable role in this space as well, facilitating that, you know, business to business contact. Under economic development, we've also tried to link up some of the major players in the district, and there's been some real successes there. So you have companies like Spears who've been encouraged to form relationships with some of our farming groups. So, you know, the produce from our farms is being used locally here. I guess, Coral or Nigel, do you have any thoughts around, you know, how we can expand that, how we could use an increased budget in those spaces? I think they're running away from me on this one. Look,
look, I was prepared to give Coral an opportunity to have a speak, but if you prefer for me to talk, Coral, I'm quite happy to. You know, all of those sorts of opportunities exist within our district, but unless we know about them, we're going to struggle to find, you know, to get people to talk together, find out opportunities. And that's where, you know, a lot of these business meetings, the business after 5 meetings, they make connections of some of these businesses within our district. And when you're making those connections, that's when you find out, hey, you know, I didn't realise you did this within your business, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got 2 businesses supporting each other within our district, which is you know, hugely beneficial, rather than going outside and outsourcing stuff from outside. So some money spent in that area, definitely in the business sector. You know, personally, I'd like to see our district have a chamber of commerce where, you know, we had an opportunity to really you know, get a lot of businesses across the district together and talk and, you know, find out opportunities. Yeah, that's my personal want, is to see some sort of chamber of commerce type setup. And how we go about that is still to play out, but yeah, I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, in terms of the additional economic development activities in the LTP, you know, when I've run through the sort of bullet points that I've been given for tonight, a number of them are relating to the surveys that would be important to ensure those connections are made. And that's the premise behind your thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Look, I think we've fairly much exhausted the options that I wanted to go over tonight, and there's not a lot of feedback coming in way of questions. So unless either Dave, Coral or Nigel, if you wish to bring up new subjects, I'm getting a couple of shakes from the head here, we'll call it quits tonight. Last time we did this, by the way, we managed to set off the alarms at council because they come on automatically at 8 o'clock. So I want to be well clear tonight. So next, Dave, from you.
Just to say, if you set the alarms off, there's not a fee associated with that, is there? I've just got my CFO hat on.
No, I quickly rang the contractors and said, oops, it's my fault. And they said, we won't log it as a call out on this case. So I escaped the fine session that might have been due. So listen, thank you very much, Coral, Nigel, for coming online. Thank you, Dave, for giving up your time.
Sorry, Andy, if I can, on a more serious note, there is a website which has got the video. I'm just getting a message here from Lisa saying refer to any viewers to the cool video on Facebook and www.framingourfuture.nz. I'm sure that's on our website.
Yes, thank you. And my appreciations for Lisa behind the scenes, and Karen, Peter and my PA that's sitting here making sure that I push all the right buttons at this end. But Dave, also a huge vote of thanks to you and the team that have put the long-term plan document, the draft document together. I know it has been a very tough year with COVID and all sorts of other things that have put pressure on councils to do this. We certainly appreciate the number of hours and weekends and after work that you've put in to make this possible. So I know it was quite a welcome to the district saying you've got all this work in front of you, but we certainly appreciate it.
Just to emphasise your point there, it was a huge team effort. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Okay. Well, look, I'll close it off there for the night unless there are any final comments.
No, just like to say thanks, Andy. I think it's been a great discussion tonight. And just, to anyone still online out there, if there's any questions from the LTP, please get in touch with your local district councillors to have a discussion. Their numbers are in that consultation document and also on the council website. So please get hold of us and have a chat if you want to find any further information or have a discussion on your views on things. So yeah, don't hesitate to give us a call.
And the final plug from me is we are opening the playground that was mentioned earlier this weekend. Go down, if you're close by here, go down and have a look at it. It is an incredible feat by a community. On that basis, I'll call it a night. Thank you very, very much for listening in, watching in, and thank you, councillors. Cheers.